As Pakistan anxiously waits for the IMF bailout program to come through, many wonder, have we really dodged a bullet? And if so, for how long? Will Pakistan be in the situation soon again? We spoke to Chairman KSB Securities Ali Farid Khwaja to find out more on Pakistan's default save and also the impact of the US dollar on Pakistan's economy and globally.
I think firstly we have to understand that the reason why the dollar is increasing is not specific to Pakistan. It's increasing against all currency. So there's the index which is called Dixie index, which tracks the performance of dollar against the top six currencies, and that's on a 20-year high. The reason why the dollar is increasing is because the Fed is raising interest rates. Now the rates are now at around 2.25 to 2.5. That's the range which the Fed has. And they're expected to rise more because inflation in the US is at a record high as well, at a multi-decade high. So the market expects the Fed to raise interest rates further by at least 75 to 100 basis points. And in anticipation of that, the dollar could rise even more. If we look at the historical example, the last time when interest rates went up by that much, the dollar went up by another 20% from where it is right now. So the dollar movement upwards and strengthening against all global currencies is causing issues not just in Pakistan, but even with the US companies. Causing issues with all the global economies, because money is flowing out of those economies and going into the US bonds, which is the risk-free asset globally. So what we have seen is that US companies have had to suffer for massive losses because of the translation impact on their international earnings. So this is a global issue, and it will continue until inflation doesn't come down in the US. So the demise of dollar has been called many times, but generally what happens is that whenever there is any crisis in the world, any kind of political crisis, any kind of economic crisis, it leads investors to put money in the safest asset. And the safest asset in the world is US dollar and US bonds. So yes, if the issue in Taiwan and vis-a-vis China deteriorates, it will make the dollar even stronger, at least in the short term. Of course, the risk is that as the dollar strengthens longer term, it will force other countries to do bilateral deals, either in commodity, vis-a-vis barter kind of transactions, or settle in other currencies. But that's a very long-term impact of it. Shorter duration or immediate impact of any kind of crisis is further strengthening of the US dollar. And certainly, strengthening of the US dollar has a negative impact on Pakistan because we are a net importer. So the only lesson for emerging markets, including Pakistan, is that we need to build and enhance our export base. Dollar is the main currency, so we need to be earning in dollars. And the only way to earn in dollars is by growing your exports. What is likely to happen is that our trade with China, Pakistan's trade with China, is likely to be settled or should be settled in yuan rather than settling in dollars, just because we don't have enough dollars to do that deals. And this is not just unique to Pakistan. We might see similar settlement between many bigger emerging markets. Russia, China is already happening. And of course, the biggest could be India, China. Like if we see that happening, then of course that's a much more bigger dent to the strength of the US dollar, or the domination of the US dollar against other currency. What we have to remember is that higher inflation is causing a lot of political pain across all the markets. It's again not unique to Pakistan. We inflation is high even in the UK and in Eurozone. So these domestic political pressures, because of high inflation, will force the governments to take other measures and develop other channels of doing trade, which in the longer term might be detrimental to both globalization as well as to the domination of the US dollar. So the risk of default was real. And that's why, of course, Pakistani international bonds came down by almost 40 to 45%. And the yields on Pakistan's sovereign default CDS went high to a record high. So the risk of default was real, and the numbers were clear on that we have a balance of payment issue. Our imports are greater than our exports. So there's a net outflow of dollar, and had it continued on that path, Pakistan would have run out of reserves, which meant that the state bank did not have enough dollar to or enough ammunition to defend the rupee, which is why the dollar was depreciating. Now, the recent strengthening of the rupee over the last 3 to 4 days is because there is a greater inflow of dollars because the money which we were due because of exports has come in, and we have already made the payments for the oil imports which we have done. And thirdly, because the government has put serious restrictions on imports, and because of that, there has been a contraction in the import bill. So it's a simple demand and supply number, which in the short term has led to both stability because of on the sentiment side as well as greater inflow of dollar against the exports of dollar. But this is a short-term measure. Of course, longer term, you can go back as long as you want. Every year, rupee does depreciate against the dollar. And over the last 12 months, this typically, on average, it depreciates by 7%, which is the annualized number. But as I said earlier, because the dollar is also strengthening, that 7% number became bigger. The dollar appreciated by the DXY index is up 20% against global currencies. So after this recent strengthening, the longer term trend of dollar will continue to be gaining against the rupee. This is only a short-term fix. The chances of Pakistan asking for a restructuring of its foreign liabilities is very real. It might not happen in the next 6 months, which is what my colleagues predicted, but it is likely to happen over the next 3 years, just because every year we need around $30 billion every year. So it's an issue which will happen again and again unless our exports grow dramatically. So what happens when a restructuring happened? And this happened in 1999. We sat with Paris Club and we asked them to restructure our debt. And in that time, because we had alignment with global political leadership, and our leadership was also able to get favorable restructuring done. So that's the key point over here. The fear right now in the market was that if there's a political change, and because one of the political parties has a very strong anti-US rhetoric, that might prevent Pakistan from negotiating a restructuring with multilateral agencies. And hence if there is a default, that default would be ugly rather than a structured, negotiated restructuring of a foreign debt. So hence we keep on coming back to that question of political stability and alignment of our politics with global politics and favorable approach by the US and other multilateral agencies towards Pakistan. If they are favorable, then we can sit and renegotiate on a friendly term like we did in 1999. If they are not friendly, and if our political regime is also not friendly towards them, then nobody knows what the outcome would be. And that's the fear which was causing panic in the exchange rate market. And that's a fear which has caused a bear run even in the equity market, i.e. in the stock market.